one of the women who comes to me for spiritual direction, who's actually a theology professor, she commented on my description of my vacation this year that God is a lover of forms. And that was just so wonderful. It startled me, and it has stuck with me. How true that is. To use Christian language, God is a lover of forms. That is creation. I mean, He, God, or she, it wouldn't have created if we weren't a lover of it. You know, look at all this panoply, you know, of form and matter and creatures and, over millennia. You know, billions of. So there's got to be some interest, some purpose to that. Because too often in religion, all religious traditions, you have this notion that you got to escape from form. It's deceptive, it's misleading, it's not real. Well, relatively perhaps, but you know, we speak about incarnation for heaven's sakes in Christianity, and you know, emptiness is form, etc. in absolute and relative in Zen. So there is something wonderful there. Speaking of the Judeo-Christian tradition, one of my favorite expressions of that, which puts it very well, is Proverbs 8, famous, the wisdom of God speaking about the creative work of God. The Lord created me at the beginning of His work, the first of His acts of old. You may know the passage. It's often used in liturgies across the centuries for the Virgin Mary, actually, as representing feminine wisdom, cosmic wisdom. But at the very end of that particular passage, it says, you see, I was beside God like a master workman as He created the world, the description of the creation of the world, establishing the heavens, drawing a circle on the face of the deep, making firm the skies. So he says, I was daily His delight. So there was a delight, you know, in this creative process, you know, in this communion here. Shagashuyin in Hebrew, it even sounds delightful. The word itself is used twice here. I was His delight, rejoicing before Him always, rejoicing in His inhabited world, rejoicing, creative wisdom, rejoicing in the inhabited world. Here it's translated in the RSV as rejoicing, but other times it's translated as playing. And the word sakak in Hebrew actually has more that sense of play. You know, it's the Hindu notion of the divine dance, you know, the celebration. It's a playful, it's play. And I looked up the Hebrew word more particularly. It's also used not only of play and dance, but of playing an instrument. So it's as if the divine is leading a cosmic symphony with all these different instruments that we are, and it's delightful. And in fact, that's the word comes up again there at the very end. Delighting in the children of men, in the sons of men. In other words, delighting in human beings. So God, creative wisdom, find their delight, you know, in humanity, in creating the created world. You know, it's not just illusion or something to flee from, it's something to delights in us. And that particular phrase is also from that last phrase there has also been used throughout the last centuries in the liturgy of the Sacred Heart of Jesus. So Jesus Himself, one of us, finds delight in us. And that's just a wonderfully curative and restorative and reassuring and delightful reminder of a relationship with the relative and the absolute. Teilhard de Chardin, the Jesuit mystic from the 20th century, often quoted in theology today, this dynamic evolutionary theology that he had a strong sense, he was a geologist as well, a paleontologist, he had a strong sense of God's being present in matter. I mean, the material which in Western philosophy is so often, you know, as I was saying a moment ago, kind of like the anti-divine, even though it came from it, is actually the vehicle. You know, you encounter, you know, the absolute in the relative, which of course is perfectly Zen. There's a beautiful passage that he has, for example, in his Hymn of the Universe, in his Pensée, which is called the Presence of God in the World. And this is what he says: the whole universe is aflame, that the starry immensities therefore expand into an ever more prodigious repository of assembled suns, S-U-N-S, and we know even more than he did today about how vast and how numerous the galaxies are in the universe. Let the light rays prolong indefinitely at each end of the spectrum, the range of their hues and their penetrative power. Let life draw from yet more distant sources the sap which flows through its innumerable branches. And let us go on, endlessly increasing our perception of the hidden powers that slumber, and the infinitesimally tiny ones that swarm about us, and the immensities that escape us, because they appear to us simply as a point. From all these discoveries, each of which plunges him a little deeper into the ocean of energy, the mystic derives an unalloyed delight, and his thirst for them is unquenchable, for he will never feel himself sufficiently dominated by the powers of the earth and the skies to be brought under God's yoke as completely as he would wish. So if you want to have an experience of God, go no further than what's right in front of you. How more wonderful and how more Zen can you be? So let's look at a couple of koans that represent this, and of course many of them do. Remember the one that's often quoted about when the Buddha is handing over his Dharma transmission to his successor. Remember on the last sermon how he determined that. He held up a flower. A flower. Little material thing, a flower. And Mahakasyapa smiled, and the Buddha knew that he got it. You don't have to go any further than the flower. God delights in forms. How wonderful a flower is. Just imagine. Just experience, rather. And this gets down to the humblest and simplest detail of material reality. You find in Joshu says the oak tree in the garden. But one of the most famous ones, in fact, it comes up in both the Mamonkan and the Blue Cliff record, repeated, is called Tozan's Magasin. Magasin is actually 3 syllables, 3 words, which mean 3 pounds of flax. So this is the one-line koan, number 12 in the Blue Cliff record. A monk asked Tozan, "What is Buddha?" The usual question. And Tozan said, 3 pounds of flax. You don't have to go any further than the tailor shop to find Buddha. There's a delight in the humblest material thing. Not even something as arguably majestic and mysterious as a flower, but even just flax. 3 pounds of flax. It's right there. And in this commentary, a Zen story is told based on this koan, and this is what happened. A monk asked, Jimon, that's Carl's name, Carl Vigiani's Dharma name. A monk asked him, Secho's teacher, what is the meaning of Tozan's Magasin? So he asks, okay, well, what does that koan mean? And Shikimo answered, the abundant blossoms, the luxurious flowers. So he refers back to the flowers and the vegetation and their abundance. So we've got a picture of that already in what I've already read. It's the abundance of this, which is itself a sermon. So the monk said, of course, I don't follow. So Kimon said, the southern bamboo, the northern trees, bamboos in the south of China, trees are luxuriant in the north, blossoms are gorgeous, flowers are beautiful, bamboo is crisp and clean, trees and woods are gigantic, and all this richness and abundance and beauty. This is Katsuki Tsukida's commentary. All this richness and abundance and beauty is to be found in Tozan's Magasin. So there you just referred back to the particular, to the beauty of what's right in front of the beauty of form. And the universe is in love with form. Absolute isn't in the relative, right there. So that's really lovely. And as I say, it's the humble things, and it's even in man-made things. Don't forget, we share in the evolutionary creativity of God, or however you want to say it. We share creativity. We produce things ourselves. We have a love of form. We create forms also. And there are koans which reflect that too, to show that that's not immune from or distinct from the same kind of thing. And this is my favorite master Joshu, in this case, number 45 in the Blue Cliff record. So a monk asks Joshu, all the dharmas are reduced to oneness, but what is oneness reduced to? So he's trying to sound smart, or complicated and philosophical. So Joshu cuts right through all that and says, when I was in Seishu, a town, I made a hempen shirt. It weighed 7 pounds. So that's what dharmas are reduced to. A hemp shirt. What the flax or whatever, what you make it into. It's still right there, the beauty of it. And again, the commentary of this author is pretty good. He says, this resembles another of Joshu's answers, and also Tozan's magazine, which we just saw. He says, Seishu, the town, seems to have been famous for fine hemp. So Joshu's words remind us of the keen sensibilities of people who lived in the days when things were made by hand, delighting in the form of workmanship. They enjoyed a close, fond relationship with the materials of their clothes and the processes by which they were made. Take delight. The 7 pounds of hemp had first to be prepared, and in the course of its being gathered, washed and spun, it was constantly being touched and felt and handled. And it was woven and cut and sewn into a shirt, all by the exercise of skillful craftsmanship. I was beside him as the master craftsman at the beginning of the universe, right? So we're reflecting that. And at the end, when Joshu put on his hempen shirt, he experienced a keen sensation, which was a direct recognition of the shirt for what it was. All reality, really. Right there in the form. So with Joshu, touching and feeling were pure cognition of the object. Even the manufacturer, well, not manufactured, handmade, made by humans. That's really beautiful. I actually had, a similar thing happened to me yesterday when I went for the first time to One World Trade Observatory, the new observatory down at the One World Trade called the Freedom Tower. It was the first time I'd been there since it opened, and I went up to the top. As I was sitting at the cafe up there looking out, the vast expanse, I was really, really very struck by the particularity of everything and the vast, beautiful vista, almost like the vista of the heavens, and the man-made objects, the little lights over the bar, and everything was just perfect. You have to take delight, and when it's so majestic as that, or the majestic like the starry heavens, then you can get an even stronger sense, of the beauty and the interrelationship of everything, and the detail, the handmade light over the bar. I mean, it's the hempen shirt. It's the flower. It's taking delight in form. So there's a luminosity and a beauty and a continuity between the absolute and the relative here. Has an inner light to it. I can't help think that today is also, for those of you who are aware of it, the feast of St. Gregory the Great, who was a great mystic, pope and mystic. Not often go together, but in his case they did. The pope and the mystic, who was also a monk, a Benedictine monk, one of the early ones. And he wrote a commentary on the first chapter of Ezekiel, mystical vision of the storm cloud and the animals with the 4 faces, remember? Which proves, by the way, this is another whole lecture, that he knew the Merkaba, Kabbalistic Jewish mysticism, mystical tradition. So we're back to the Judeo-Christian that we started with a second ago in Proverbs. And in the middle of this vision, in the middle of the fire, there was what was seemed to be it's chashmal in Hebrew, which they're not quite sure. It's some kind of shining metal. And in the Greek and Latin versions, it was called electrum or electron, where you get the word electron. But scholars agree there seems to be a mixture, and this is what Gregory meant, of gold and silver. Meaning, if you will, the gold and the silver, the gold of the divine and the silver of the relative are so similar, and they're joined together in one thing, just like, as Pope Gregory points out, just like the divine and the human in Christ. So the same point being made about incarnation and delighting in the relative. So that luminosity. I'd like to connect it to a poem of Rumi, someone just mentioned. One of the great images of the absolute relative coming together, from Zen, that we've talked about before, is the wave and the ocean. The wave is the water, the wave is the ocean, and but it's also a wave. It's beautiful. The danger being if you cling to it, and the wave says to itself, I was just reading this, if the wave says, oh my God, I'm going to die when I get to the shore, and that'll be the end of it, oh my God. But no, it's water. You're worried about it. So anyway, I find the exact same image here in Rumi. The ocean waves are the closest likeness of two wise men meeting. When wind makes from unity the numerous. Wind makes the waves. When wind makes from unity the numerous. This happened to the sun. You speak about luminosity. This happened to the sun, and it broke into rays through the window, into bodies. And Kabbalah speaks about the shards of light scattered throughout the universe. The human-divine combination is a oneness, says Rumi, which is what Gregory just said about Christ, gold and silver. Huh? Plurality is the apparent separation into rays. It is a separation into rays, but apparent, because it's still the water, it's still the light, it's still the sun. Friend, he says, we're traveling together. Throw off your tiredness. You should be delighted. Throw off your tiredness. Let me show you one tiny spot of the beauty that cannot be spoken, which you can find anywhere, in every tiny spot. He says, I'm like an ant that's gotten into the granary, ludicrously happy, trying to lug out a grain that's way too big. That's a great image. We're like an ant in a huge granary, and we're lugging out a grain, ludicrously happy that we have this wonderful grain, and everywhere there's a grain. And the whole universe is a grain, just like Julian Norwich said about the whole universe being like a hazelnut. So, to conclude, that reminded me of another koan about a grain of rice. Exactly. It's funny how all these traditions come together with these images, interconnected. The whole thing is interconnected. That's what's wonderful. Case 5 in the Blue Cliff record. Seppo's grain of rice. And he says, all the great world, if I pick it up with my fingertips, which you can do, right? Whatever you pick up is the whole universe, is found to be like a grain of rice. And we should be ludicrously happy, like an ant, right? Find to be like a grain of rice. I throw it in front of your face, it says, but you do not see it. Do you see it? Beat the drum, telling the monks to come out to work and search for it. See it. We're traveling together, friend. Throw off your tiredness. See everything in a grain of rice, in a grain of sand, in a hempen shirt, a silk shirt you find in Vietnam like I did, whatever, in the light over the bar, in the flower on the field. Delight in it. God loves forms. So should you.